Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about Lewy body dementia, also known as dementia with Lewy bodies. I am going to focus on what is Lewy body dementia, what are the suggested treatments for it, the effects of prescribed drugs on the brain, and then I will wrap it all up. So, what is Lewy body dementia? The name kind of describes itself. It is a dementia, so it is a form of memory loss, and it is caused by a buildup of Lewy bodies in the brain. The symptomology of Lewy body dementia consists of altered thinking and reasoning, confusion, visual hallucinations, and delusions. They will act out dreams and can sometimes act very violently. They display a malfunctioning autonomic nervous system. They have memory loss, and some of them can display Parkinson's symptoms. So what are Lewy bodies? Lewy bodies are deposits in the brain composed of a protein called alpha-synuclein. Alpha-synuclein is a protein found throughout the brain. This is a picture of what a cell looks like with Lewy body. So this right here is the Lewy body, and this is the cell with the nucleus. In the case of dementia, the alpha-synuclein are misfolded and form into deposits, and that's what you see here is the deposit of the Lewy body. These deposits inhibit proper neuronal communication by interfering with the internal actions of the neuron. It reminds me of a blood clot where plaque can build up in the artery and blood can no longer flow through. So with the buildup of alpha-synuclein, leading to Lewy bodies, the cell can't function as it's supposed to because everything can't move around in the cell for it to function properly. Blocking a neuron with Lewy body deposits would prevent exoplasmic transport. The deposits in the synapse prevent proper exocytosis, such as packaging, storage, release of the neurotransmitters. Without the release of neurotransmitters, the cell doesn't really have a function, so it leads to apoptosis and the cell dies. So this is a picture of the ace-nuclein misfolded and blocking the cell. So it starts off as this misfolded protein, and it continues and continues to misfold until it gets bigger, and then it continues even more until it gets even larger, and then it gets deposited into the cells, and it blocks certain areas of it, and they've also found it in the synapse of the cells as well that block the exocytosis process. Lewy bodies affect several areas of the brain. They include the cerebral cortex, which is important for executive functioning, such as planning and decision making, the limbic system, which is important for emotional and behavioral regulation, the hippocampus, which is pertinent for memory formation, the midbrain, specifically the substantia nigra, which is critical for movement. This is the area that is also affected in Parkinson's disease. Lewy bodies also affect the brainstem, which is important for regulating sleep and alertness, and it can also affect the olfactory pathways of the brain that help us smell. There are a lot of similarities between Lewy body dementia and Parkinson's disease. One of the most prominent similarities is the presence of Lewy bodies in both of them. The main difference is the order in which the symptoms actually present themselves. Someone with Parkinson's disease presents first with motor impairments and then proceeds to develop memory loss. On the flip side, a patient with Lewy body dementia presents first with memory loss, and then over time you would continue to see motor impairments. The suggested treatments of Lewy body dementia consist of both non-prescription avenues as well as prescription medications. Prescription medications are the main avenue for counteracting the symptoms of Lewy body dementia. However, application of additional therapies supplies a well-rounded therapeutic effect for the patient. Physical therapy would include exercises to maintain strength, flexibility, and movement. Speech therapy would help with poor enunciation as well as swallowing difficulties. Occupational therapy would help maintain everyday skills to promote independence. Psychotherapy is important to individually recognize and work on emotional and behavioral symptoms. Support groups are essential for caregivers to help them maintain their own sanity and is a judgment-free zone for them to express their frustrations. Medications used to treat Lewy body dementia consist of three main drugs. The first is cholinesterase inhibitors. These are used to relieve cognitive symptoms and work primarily in the prefrontal cortex, where emotion regulation of the limbic system and executive functioning, things such as critical thinking, planning, and decision-making, are controlled. The second is levodopa, which is used to relieve movement symptoms. This drug works on the striatum in the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is the main hub in our brain for movement. The third is antipsychotics, such as haloperidol, that are used to prevent hallucinations. Antipsychotics work on D2 receptors throughout the brain, including the caudate and putamen, believed to play a role in repetitive behaviors, the nucleus accumbens, which is for reward and pleasure, the olfactory tubercle, that helps our smell, and they're found also throughout the cerebral cortex, where our higher brain actions such as thought and function occurs. This is the category, antipsychotics, that can be controversial for people with dementia, especially those with Lewy body, because of the way they react in the brain. The reaction can lead to neuroleptic sensitivity. Researchers are not sure why patients with Lewy body dementia react so adversely to antipsychotics, but it is extremely common for them to have adverse side effects that include increased confusion, worsened Parkinsonism, extreme sleepiness, and low blood pressure that can result in fainting. Now I will move into the effects of the prescribed drugs. The cholinesterase inhibitors focus primarily on the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. In people with Lewy body dementia, acetylcholine is in short supply, and that is disrupting the communication between the two nerve cells. Well, all the nerve cells. Cholinesterase inhibitors stop or inhibit the enzyme AKE that degrades acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft. As you may know, acetylcholine is removed from the synaptic cleft by enzyme degradation. Cholinesterase inhibitors are stopping this from happening, so more acetylcholine is left in the synaptic cleft to continue to bind to receptors on the postsynaptic cell. This communication between the nerve cells is critical for stabilizing dementia. It helps them to continue to make connections within their brain to help continue to form new memories and remember old memories as well. So in this diagram, you can see the acetylcholine being released, and then usually the ACHE will break down the acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft into choline and acetate, and it'll go back into the cell. But the inhibitors inhibit the AKE from breaking it down. As you can see, there's only a couple here, and more acetylcholine is left in the synaptic cleft. Levodopa, as I mentioned, is paramount for movement symptoms. It is a drug that's used primarily to treat irregular movement behaviors in Parkinson's patients. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, so it is very easily converted to dopamine, and dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is important for controlling movement. So, levodopa mimics the chemical structure of L-dopa and serves as a precursor for dopamine. When administered, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and converts into dopamine to make up for the loss of dopamine transmission in the substantia nigra. It is used to combat movement deficiencies such as tremors, stiffness, spasms, and muscle control. For patients that have side effects to levodopa, doctors can prescribe carbidopa-levodopa. Carbidopa prevents levodopa from being broken down before it reaches the brain, so more dopamine can ultimately be produced from its precursor. The combination of these two allows for a lower dose of levodopa to be prescribed, reducing the unpleasant side effects. So in this image, you can see a normal synapse has a pretty normal amount of dopamine in the synaptic cleft that's activating the receptors. But a synapse with levodopa The levodopa converts it to more dopamine, and the dopamine moves into the synapse, and there's more dopamine to activate the receptors on the postsynaptic terminal. Antipsychotics, such as the haloperidol that I mentioned earlier, are often used for patients with Alzheimer's that have aggressive behaviors. It works well with Alzheimer's patients, but the brains of patients with Lewy body dementia react differently for reasons researchers have not figured out yet. It causes neuroleptic sensitivity. Neuroleptics are antipsychotics, so it's basically saying they are sensitive to antipsychotics. When the neuroleptics are administered, they act as D2 dopamine receptor antagonists on the nigrostriatal, hypothalamic, mesolimbic, and mesocortical pathways. What this means is the neuroleptics, or the antipsychotics, are blocking the dopamine receptors that are in the brain of these specific areas. And it's these specific areas that are related to the areas I mentioned earlier, such as the cerebral cortex, limbic system, and the hippocampus that have problems in Lewy body dementia. Several hospital settings aren't up to date with how Lewy body dementia patients react to antipsychotics, so it's a problem with a lot of doctors prescribing these conventional antipsychotics to people with Lewy body dementia, and their behavior continues to get worse, and the doctors continue to up the dose, and the results can be fatal. So it's really important, the research that is being done currently on the effects of antipsychotics in the brain of people with Lewy body dementia. And here is a picture of the D2 receptors that the antipsychotics work on. So here is the receptor, and this is the antagonist, the antipsychotic that binds to the receptor. So to wrap it all up, we can look at what the future holds for patients with Lewy body dementia. One of the biggest findings that researchers have right now is the concept of synapse regeneration. If it is in fact Lewy bodies alone that are disrupting the neuronal communication in dementia, they are now coming up with ways to regenerate synapses that are weak to make them stronger and increase the communication, and in a result counteract the effects of dementia. The concept around this is microglia, which are glial cells that help protect neurons by depleting unwanted microbodies from entering in the cells or fighting them once they have entered. So they are finding that lesions made in the synapses show a migration of microglia to those lesions, and the more and more microglia that are migrating down there are fixing the lesions, and the synapses are regenerating and becoming strong again. So their hope is they can mimic this in people with Lewy body dementia, and most likely also Parkinson's as well, and it will help them retain and restore their memory. And that is my presentation on Lewy body dementia. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something.